up, everyone? This is Adam Fromal and Dan Favale here with the Full Court Press. We're about to enter into the third week of the NBA season, and some teams have emerged as hot starters that we wouldn't really expect. We have three of them that were supposed to be right in the hunt for Andrew Wiggins or whoever ends up at the top of the 2014 draft class: the Phoenix Suns, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Charlotte Bobcats. So today we're going to be playing legit or bullshit with them. Are they for real, or are they just a complete fluke, a mirage, if you will? So Dan, right off the bat, which of those is the most legit in your mind?
We're talking Bobcats, Suns, and Sixers. Out of all three of them, I'm going to go with the Suns because Eric Bledsoe is balling right now. And he actually looks like someone that you could build your franchise around, which I don't want to say I'm shocked, but did we really expect him to leave the Clippers and play like this?
I mean, no, not really. I think we thought that he would have some growing pains, but that he could develop into a franchise point guard. But I mean, the Suns didn't extend him right away before the deadline for a reason. They wanted to see what they had. And apparently they have a stud.
What do you think that's going to cost them? Do you think he gets a max deal this summer?
I do. With the premium on point guard play, the way he's looking right now, I could definitely see one desperate team giving him a max deal. And Phoenix would match it. They have to.
Yeah, they have no choice. That's what I was about to say, is it might not even be a matter of one team is desperate. They'll just know that Phoenix has to match it, so let's make them pay top dollar, limit their cap flexibility moving forward. I think it's kind of like...
Here's the other thing. Who on that roster is expensive? They don't have to pay anybody.
Hey, Emeka Okafor. Emeka Okafor. You know they want to sign him to a max deal after this season. I'm really kidding. But after Okafor, who's off the books anyway, I think their most expensive players like Channing Frye or somebody like that. So, yeah, they don't have to pay anybody. But I think you'll just see, even if a team doesn't necessarily need him, or just wants to just field him a max offer so that Phoenix has to match, so they'll pay top dollar for probably who's one of the best point guards on the market now this summer. So they didn't screw themselves, I guess, because it's not like he's not worth the money, but they definitely could have had him for cheaper if they would have signed him before Halloween.
Sure. Now, when you say the Suns are legit, how legit are we talking about? I mean, if the season ended right now, they'd have one of the top seeds.
Yeah, which is obviously not the team that they are. They're not a team that's going to win 70% of their games or more. They're holding their home court, which is incredibly impressive. So I'm interested to see what happens when they play a little bit more on the road. I think they've played 3 games on the road and they're 1-2. So I want to see what they do there. But with this team, no trades. With this team in the Western Conference, the way it is kind of right now, I could see them winning like 35 games, 35 to 40 games, most likely in that 35 to 37 range, though. What about you?
I could see that as well. I mean, just maybe competing for that 8th spot if they keep everything together, but I don't think they have enough established talent to actually get it. But I think it's pretty clear that they're not the absolute bottom feeder we thought they were going to be.
Now, that's got to piss off Ryan McDonough. Even Jeff Hornacek was shocked. He said, I didn't expect us to be this good.
But here's the thing. I don't think it's as concerning to them that they're actually decent as it is to the Philadelphia 76ers. Because the Sixers have their top pick and then the one that they're getting from the Pelicans that's top 5 protected. But the Suns are going to have, 4 first-round picks or something if everything goes according to plan? So there isn't as much a premium on getting as high up with that first one as they can.
I get that. I could see it being less of an ordeal for them than it is the Sixers or a team like the Jazz if they all of a sudden went on a 20-game winning streak, which we know they won't. But they want that top pick because what's the point of being in the middle? So it might not be as unnerving for them, but what's the point? They're going to have to make a trade. I don't know who they're going to trade because if you look at them, they're really... If you want to keep Eric Bledsoe, which let's assume they do want to keep him, who do they trade that's really going to make them tank? I guess Goran Dragic?
I think that's the only option. You can't trade one of the Morris twins. That's not going to happen on their current deals. You're not going to trade Miles Plumlee. You're not going to be able to trade Gerald Green.
You might be able to trade Gerald Green. He's only got a year left after this year.
But what's that going to do?
No, it's going to do...
Yeah, he's been playing well. Is that going to actually make you lose more games?
No, playing Channing Frye more might help them lose more games because he's clearly not back in the swing of things. That's another contract.
To move him too.
That's another contract they'd probably welcome to move, but I doubt. I'm not sure they could move it. So they're one of the teams that's difficult for me to look at and be like, they can do this and they'll be back to tanking the way they should. That's why that's why I have them as a legit team because you can't you remove any piece other than Bledsoe and this team doesn't change drastically. Like I said, maybe Dragic, but that's a maybe. I mean, we're looking at they were already without him for 2 games and played well.
Yeah, exactly. I don't see many warning signs that they're going to suddenly come back down to earth. I think they'll get a better effort from a lot of teams and fall below 500, but there's a big difference between winning 35 games and winning like 15 like we thought was going to happen after they traded Gortat away.
What would you do though as their GM? Well, would you let it ride? Would you try and trade someone? And if you had to trade someone or more than one player, who would they be?
I'm going to let it ride. If I'm the general manager there, I want to see what happens. I want to see what I have with this roster because I have that horde of picks coming in the drafts. I know I can find players at different positions in a stacked class that goes beyond those top prospects. I mean, it's going to be 20 deep with potential star players.
Whoa, 20 deep?
I mean, you're gonna find some in the late teens is what I mean. Not everyone in the top 20 is going to be a star. So if I had to trade, it's Dragic, though, because Bledsoe can play either guard position.
I would most definitely not let it ride because I'm all about let's not be the Milwaukee Bucks and be in the middle and just make the playoffs or completely miss the playoffs. But which kind of complicates things because we were just talking about their contract situations. I don't want to get rid of that dual backcourt that they're running right now. I think Dragic and Bledsoe could make for a nice tandem in the future. And like you said, you're not going to want to move one of the Morris twins at this point. I think the only thing you could do is maybe try and package Emeka Okafor's expiring deal with Channing Frye's and maybe Gerald.
But that's not changing the makeup of the team. That's not letting it ride. Because Okafor's not playing now.
That's fair. That is fair. But I'm talking about use his contract to move some of the guys who are contributing but aren't great, like maybe a Fry and a Green, and take back maybe a bloated deal that ends after next year for someone who maybe won't make any kind of impact, like will ride the bench, because Fry and Green are playing. Green's contract will be easy to move. Fry's will be more difficult, but maybe if you package it with Okafor's and take back a bloated deal that expires in 2015, because they're not going to go anywhere next year either, even if they win the lottery. They'll be contending for the middle again. So this is a long-term plan, but they're probably the most complex situation out there right now.
Yeah, I mean, I predicted on Twitter right after they traded Gortat that they would be a playoff team by 2015. And everything I'm seeing so far this season...
Were you drunk when you did that?
Good about that.
Were you drunk? Actually, you live in Denver. Were you high when you did that?
I was 5,280 feet high, but that's it. So anyway, remember you're talking to an Atlanta Hawks fan here. I would never wish that upper-level mediocrity on any other franchise. It kind of sucks to root for. So when I say I want to let it ride, it's only because I do feel like they can escape mediocrity even without making an immediate move. And I'm going to give the last word on the subject to myself, and let's move on to the Philadelphia 76ers now. Legit or bullshit?
Bullshit. I think they're getting pummeled by the Spurs as we're talking right now. I think we've already seen it at Spurs. I think they'll be one of those teams that can upset a contender that's not taking them seriously enough, as we saw them do with the Heat. It's one of those things where it's like no team is ever as bad as you predict them to be. I feel like the historically bad teams are a surprise. The Bobcats, during the lockout truncated year, no one predicted them to be that bad. So I think it's one of those situations where they're playing above expectations because we didn't give them enough credit. We didn't give them any credit. I think that was the problem leading into the offseason.
I mean, I was calling them a D-League team.
Yeah, their coach called them a D-League team pretty much.
Yeah, 6 NBA players on the roster. The rest are just fighting for their NBA lives.
To their credit, though, the Sixers tried to field a D-League team. They didn't hire a coach until the last minute, so I don't know how those guys know a playbook. I'm pretty sure, at least in the beginning, he just put them on the court and said, go. Like, I don't know if there was any structure there, but they tried to be horrendous, and they're not horrendous. I still don't think they win 30 games this year, but I think that's largely in part because Sam Hinkie is going to deal Evan Turner and Thaddeus Young.
Yeah, I can see about 20 to 25 wins. I think I was not very high on Michael Carter-Williams when he was coming out.
Who was?
I know, exactly. He was supposed to be really raw, didn't have a jumper, was going to turn the ball over, struggle in half-court sets. He's legit.
He looks like he should teach Derrick Rose how to protect the ball at this point.
Exactly. It's crazy. I think that he could develop into a future All-Star. I don't think that he's going to maintain this type of production throughout the year. I think Brett Brown is legit. I think Evan Turner is kind of legit. He's not going to keep playing like this because he'll never land in that number one role again. But he's proven that he deserves some money in the offseason. But I have to call bullshit on the team because they're shooting unsustainable percentages. There's no way they can keep winning without playing any defense like they've been doing. And as you said, Sam Hinkie's going to make a move if they do keep winning.
How long do you wait if you're Hinkie?
That's a great question. I think basically he has to keep his phone on at all times. If a team calls tomorrow and says, "Hey, we want Turner," or "Hey, we want Thad Young," he's got to do it.
He's in a unique situation too because if I'm him, you're right. He has to have his phone on. I'm not making any calls though until if it's before the All-Star break and he sees that his team has like 10 or 12 wins. That's when he has to start working the phones. But until then, let the suitors come to him. Try and glean as much draft picks from them as he can.
Especially because their value is only going to go up as the season progresses. I mean, what happens when a contender has a piece go down and all of a sudden they're desperate? That's when you make your move.
Yeah, I think he's just going to have to let teams come to him. That said, if we get to the point where it's the end of December and they're approaching, 15 wins, then he might have to be aggressive himself because by that point, contenders aren't necessarily desperate. It's around February, late January, early February, and until the trade deadline that they start getting really needy. So I don't think you make any moves right now unless an offer comes along that you're willing to pounce on. But I think you have to keep in the back of your mind, you got to come up with a magic number. Like, if we get to X amount of wins by this date, I got to blow it up.
Yeah. Now, we're almost working with this underlying inherent expectation that Philadelphia is going to come back to earth. What would have to happen to convince you that that's not going to happen? In what bizarro world are they actually a legitimate team?
Well, Carter Williams has to sustain his current production. You can't deal Evan Turner or Thaddeus Young. Spencer Hawes has to keep playing out of his mind. And I won't believe that Turner, Carter Williams, and Hawes can play this way for the entire season until we're well into December and they're still doing it.
The other thing that concerns me is how much Carter Williams is running. So we have that SportVU player tracking stuff now on NBA.com. He has run more than any other player in the league so far. He's averaging the most for 48 minutes, and that was going into tonight's game against the Spurs.
Yeah, I mean...
So that really worries me because it's so hard to make the transition from college to the NBA without hitting the wall already, and they're just running him to death.
That might be their plan. No, let's not run him to death, but that'll give them an excuse to rest him later on in the season. I'm not really worried about it because I feel like the rookie wall hasn't been as prevalent over the last couple of years. It's definitely there, I feel like, for the lower to mid-tier rookies. But when you get a star, Damian Lillard never really hit that last year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're seeing that in every sport where the younger players are more ready
prepared
to succeed right away.
Yeah, but it's not even that. But if it's a star player, is what I'm talking about. If he's truly going to keep up this level of production, I don't think it's going to be the rookie wall that stops him. I think you can't say that this team... Let's not even talk about what they need to do. When can you officially say that this team isn't going to be as horrendous as we thought? And that's not really until they start recycling opponents more. They're facing a lot of these teams only once, and then a lot more of them will come back around who will be more prepared for them and have scouting reports and things like that. So I'm not ready, let's talk when they beat the Heat again or something. So
sure, but my answer to your original question, when are we ready to admit that they're not as horrendous as we think, is right now. I didn't think they'd have a win by now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I didn't think they'd have a win either. So, but when are you ready to change it from bullshit to legit? That would be when they start recycling opponents and beating teams again. Once they start beating good teams again, then we're like, fuck, this team is pretty damn good.
Exactly. I don't think I can put it any better than that.
Well, that means that we should probably journey on to the Charlotte Bobcats, who are trying not to tank, and it miffs me. I want to call bullshit on their record at the moment because they're not a close to 500 basketball team. Even with a healthy Al Jefferson, they shouldn't be a close to 500 basketball team. I think they've capitalized off catching teams early, the New York Knicks for one, and there's no way they're going to sustain that type of performance. I'll be interested to see how Al Jefferson fits in, but are we really going to say that this team can toil with 35 to 40 victories? Are we going to say that they can toil with, let's say, 40, around 500?
I am. And it's weird because the word legit and the Charlotte Bobcats never used to go in the same sentence unless it was like legitimately bad. But they've looked good so far, and they aren't as good as they could be. I mean, they've played without Al Jefferson. They haven't gotten consistent shooting from Gerald Henderson or Kemba, but there have been a lot of signs of good things in place. I mean, Kemba has been playing great basketball aside from his shot. He's averaging like 1.8 turnovers per game, which is pretty impressive for someone that has so much ball
slowly,
dominance.
since he's entered the league, all right, well, it's obviously he hasn't been in the league that long, but last year and this year, he's kind of emerged as that dark horse candidate for a most improved player award. I don't think he'll ever win it, but he's quietly gotten better each season.
I mean, last year, right before the All-Star break, there was a little bit of buzz about him potentially making the team if he had a nice run right before the selections ended.
Yeah,
but
so
I think he's just getting better and better.
He's just, I don't think he's in the best situation, so I don't know, as long as he's in Charlotte, I don't think we'll ever know what his full potential is. I mean, he cried. He said he cried when he found out that they signed Al Jefferson because he was so excited. And if Al Jefferson's going to reduce you to tears for anything other than his poor defense, then you know that you've got issues. But I agree that they're better than I gave them credit for. I just don't see them. I'll be shocked if they hit 40 victories. I'll be shocked, astounded.
I'll be minorly surprised, but it wouldn't make my jaw drop. And the reason that I haven't gotten to is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. He looks fantastic.
Jump shot.
Just a pure energy guy who's actually developing some semblance of a jumper. And the work that he can do off the ball is just astounding. I mean, the number of offensive rebounds that he gets for a player his size and then has the strength to get right back up and finish them is really impressive. And he's a great complement for Kemba and Henderson once they start shooting the ball a little better. I know Henderson's not really a jump shooter, but he can still space the court out a little better than MKG.
You know what I think a problem is with Michael Kidd-Gilchrist and even a guy like, let's say, Iman Shumpert or even Jimmy Butler, is they're viewed as defensive specialists and their teams don't give them enough burn on offense to create their own offense, to shoot more jumpers. And Michael Kidd-Gilchrist is kind of an anomaly right now because I feel like the Bobcats are giving him those opportunities, which is interesting because once you're labeled as a defensive specialist, even early on, like he was labeled last year before he even came into the league, they were like, he's not really going to score much, he's going to defend. It's so hard to climb out of that hole. Your team stereotypes you. So I've been really impressed with how involved he's been on the offensive end at times. But is he their only perimeter defender? I don't look on that team and see another good defender on the outside.
I think you got to consider Jeff Taylor one.
Yeah, that's true. He's athletic enough, but I find like he lacks discipline, in my opinion.
Well, he's young. It's only his second season now, and I think you're going to see him take more strides this year, especially as he watches MKG play.
He's someone to watch, and he'll get an opportunity because the Bobcats are so bad. But I still have to stick with bullshit. If Al Jefferson can come back and even put up 20 and 10, if we're talking in terms of what's the goal, what was the Bobcats' goal coming into this season? Their goal was to make the playoffs. You don't spend that money on Al Jefferson without thinking that you could contend for that last seed in the East. If they don't do that, they're full of shit. And they're full of shit. They're not going to get that 8th seed.
See, I'm still not sure I agree with that because they're so deep, too. They've been 11 deep so far, and that's without Gennaro Pargo and Ben Gordon entering into the rotation at all. Both of those can be useful players at times. So once Jefferson is back, once Cody Zeller has been worked in, because they're bringing him along slowly. He played a lot more against the Hawks tonight than he has in crucial situations throughout the first 6 games. Once Kemba and Gerald Henderson start hitting more shots, which they will, especially Kemba, as he showed us last year, I think there's a lot more that can go right for this team, and already a lot has gone pretty well. I don't think they're by any means an elite team, but competing for that 8th seed in the East isn't saying that much because none of the teams that are supposed to be there have really asserted themselves as anything special so far.
I totally agree, and teams like the Cavs and the Wizards especially have been wildly disappointing, but game on the line, and as the season goes on, you're going to see more of these games on the line, team goes through a rough patch. Who on that team is going to pull them out of it? Jefferson's never been that guy. He can score, but they don't have that. They have that Kemba who will do his crossover in the final seconds. They just don't have that leadership yet. I think that's going to get them there, where I think Wall might have what it takes to bring the Wizards to that 8th spot, where Kyrie definitely has what it takes. We all know Brandon Jennings is a superstar. I'm just kidding about that last part.
See, I'm going to disagree just because I believe in Kemba. And I promised myself I would never bet against him.
I'm not saying I don't believe in him. I just don't think he's an established enough leader to lead his team to the playoffs, and that's what he'll need to do.
Now, when you say an established leader, what do you mean? Because he led that Connecticut team to a title.
That's great. What has he had to lead the Bobcats towards since he entered the NBA? Who has he been around to groom?
Because he hasn't had another teammate to work with.
Yeah, but who? That's the thing about leaders is you, on some level, unless you're that superstar out of college, like Kyrie Irving, like John Wall, you need that veteran to help groom you. Who has he had to groom him into a bona fide leader?
You mentioned John Wall as the guy who Kemba almost has to strive for because he has that leadership and ability to carry a team to the 8th seed. What did Wall do his first couple of years in the league when he wasn't surrounded by talent?
He didn't lead his team to the playoffs. But I'm not trying to classify them in terms of that. Wall I never thought he was worth a max contract and underachieved, but he has that leadership quality. I'm talking, you hate this, and I normally hate it too, but I enjoy indulging every once in a while. I'm talking intangibles. And when you're looking at some of those fringe teams, I want to see a guy that can propel you past that point. I was shocked when the Bucks made the playoffs last year because they had absolutely no leadership. So if the Bobcats do that, it'll be a similar situation for me. I don't see them having enough talent, even let's say if leadership wasn't a problem. You're talking about them being 11 deep. How deep do they go in terms of playoff-worthy talent? 3 or 4?
No, that's a good point, and I think it's a little deeper than 4. I think the biggest difference in our beliefs about this team, just it all goes down to what we think about Walker. And you don't think he has those intangibles. I do.
I don't think he has those intangibles yet. I just want to make that clear. I'm not saying he won't get there. I just think that Charlotte is a place where talent goes to die sometimes. I think he's perseverant enough and talented enough to get through it. I just don't see him as that guy right now that you see him as.
Charlotte is a place where talent goes to die, or Charlotte was a place where talent goes to die, because no team ever remains mired in that futility for too long. Like, the NBA is pretty cyclical, except for a couple franchises. At some point, that statement's going to change.
I'm not prepared to say was right now, though. So, is there any evidence that it was by now? You can't look at me and tell me Kemba Walker is the example of talent that has panned out in Charlotte. I want to see a rookie last his rookie deal and not leave or be traded. And I think it was a good move to get Jefferson because that proved there's a bigger name, I guess, that will come to Charlotte. But it's Al fucking Jefferson. So it's not like they landed a superstar. So I'm not ready to say was where talent goes to die. I think Jefferson will be good on that team because he'll be the second offensive option. They'll feed him the ball all the time. I'm not ready to say that Charlotte's the place that can bring in talent, develop them, and tap their full potential. I'm not ready to say that yet.
All right, well, since this is the only one of the three that we disagree on, I think we agree that the Suns were legit and that the Sixers were bullshit. I think we got to kind of have a gentleman's bet on this one. I think they hit 35 wins.
I'll take the under. I'll take the under.
All right.
I bet you.
We'll discuss after the season.
Yeah, I bet. No. Let's do this now. I bet you a "What Burns My Bacon" segment, but I'll just sing your praises the entire time in "What Burns My Bacon." We'll call it what browns my bacon, which is how everybody likes their bacon. I'll bet you.
Go for that.
Yeah, we'll call that a deal right now, so our 5 viewers will know that we have a gentleman's agreement.
All right, well, I think we got to move on to our final legit or bullshit team. This one's a little different because this team, everyone assumed that they were going to be good. They would compete for a playoff spot in the West. I don't think anyone thought they would be this good. And we're talking about the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have seen Kevin Love emerge as not just a superstar, but potentially an MVP candidate if he plays like this. Kevin Martin has just been balling out of his fucking mind. He's hitting everything. So legit or bullshit?
In terms, it depends on the context, obviously. I'm going to say they're a legitimate playoff team if healthy. They're a bullshit contender. They're not contending for a championship. They're not a top 4. I don't even necessarily think they're a top 5 team in the Western Conference, though the Rockets and Clippers have been pretty mercurial right now, and so have the Grizzlies. So it's possible they're a top 5 team. They're not a top 4 team. They're not a contender. So much is predicated on health. If anyone thinks that Kevin Martin is going to continue to shoot like he's been shooting, God fucking help them.
He's like 58% from downtown right now. That's not sustainable. It's a little like OJ Mayo last year.
No, and it's incredible that he's doing that because he's really, if you think about it, Rubio doesn't even shoot when he's open, nor if he's outside of 9 feet of the basket is he likely to score. He's really the second option, quote unquote, on that team that needs to be defended, and he's finding himself open ridiculously. I can't believe how open he is sometimes. I guess teams are focusing too much on Peck and Love at times, but he's not going to sustain that. What do you have them in at? What do you have them as, though? I want to split it up into 2 tiers for this team. As what we've seen now as a legitimate playoff team, not a fringe team, as a legitimate playoff team, and then as a title contender.
As a legitimate playoff team, I think that's a given at this point. I already thought they were going into the season. As a contender, hesitant bullshit. Only because none of the top teams have really asserted themselves so far except for the Spurs and the Thunder. So beyond those 2 teams, I think that the Clippers will rebound and get up there. But I think there's a drop-off in talent after that 3rd team. I could see them sneaking in as the number 4 seed and having home court advantage a little ways into the playoffs. And I think that's primarily just because I believe in love. I guess I should say I believe in a thing called love.
Yeah, that's a little bit of a cliche, though. But I agree with you. I believe in Love more than most people, too. I never understood the rap he got. This is going to be an interesting 2 years because if the Timberwolves don't really make it out of the first round, there's no way he stays there beyond 2015. He would be crazy if they don't trade him first, obviously. You're right about there being a drop-off in talent from the 3 spot. I just don't see them finishing even in that top 4 spot because as much as I hate the Clippers, you have the Thunder, the Spurs, the Clippers, and the Warriors. And I think those are your top 4 teams in the West, bar none. And then you have the Rockets, and then you have the Grizzlies. So Minnesota realistically...
I don't want to put the Grizzlies there, just so you know. I don't believe in them right now.
I could see the Grizzlies finish...
Different discussion.
I could put the Grizzlies 8th. That is a different discussion. I could see the Grizzlies finishing... I told you this before, too. I could see them finishing 4th or 8th. Somewhere in between there, because that's just how they play. But whatever. Too much of a tangent. I just think that there's too many teams that the Timberwolves would have to legitimately usurp that are actually better than them on paper and most likely in games for them to get home court advantage. And home court advantage is going to be huge for them if they can get it in the playoffs because that's the only way they sneak out of the first round is if they get home court advantage and somehow beat a team like they're probably going to wind up facing like a Rockets or a Grizzlies team, one of those like middle teams, maybe a Warriors team. I don't think over a 7-game series that they could even withstand any of those teams. Maybe the Grizzlies, cautiously.
Right now, my prediction is that they're going to end up playing the Warriors in that 4-5 matchup, regardless of which way the seeding works. And that's going to be an incredibly entertaining series.
Well, I actually have a question about it. Do you think the Timberwolves can keep up this style of play all year? We've seen the Warriors, run and gun type deal, but can the Timberwolves keep shooting at such a high clip? Their defense has been pretty good. Do you see them sustaining this?
They can't keep shooting like this. Love can, because his percentages actually aren't that ridiculous. But once Pekovic starts playing better, and he's done nothing. He's been a black hole in the paint, and whenever you throw the ball in, he's either going to miss it or turn it over. Once he starts playing a little better, and I think he's recovering from a jet-setting offseason. I mean, he was out of touch when they were trying to re-sign him. They couldn't find him.
$60 million was too much for him.
Think,
even after the season he had, $60 million was way too much.
Oh, sure. And I mean, I don't think Peck is an elite center, or even he's on the verge of falling out of my personal top 10. Don't really want to get into that now, though. He's not this bad. He's been awful so far in like every facet of the game. Once he starts playing better, that takes pressure off Love and Martin. And then the Kevins aren't going to maintain this type of production, but they're still good players to have in the roles they're in.
Kevin Love, best power forward in the game right now?
Absolutely. Who else is on that same level?
Nobody. I agree. I just wanted to see what you thought. We both can't stand Blake Griffin. I just wanted to see where you were at.
Well, I can stand Blake Griffin, and I think he's playing really well this season.
I think
he and Anthony Davis are the primary challenges at this point.
I could see Davis, off topic, I could see Davis being the best big man in the game one day. I actually just wrote something on this before we started talking. There's no one in the league that can do everything he can. But another topic, another day.
His current averages right now, they have only been matched over the course of a full season by David Robinson in 91-92 and Hakeem Olajuwon in 89-90.
I'm actually going to up the ante on you once because I just found this out. We're going to talk stuff he already did. In terms of total, I think he has something like, in terms of having at least 1,000 points, 600 rebounds, 130 blocks, and 90 steals through the first 71 games of their career, only David Robinson has matched those totals. Ever. He's going to be incredible.
There's no doubt Davis is a stud, but he's not even close to Love's level.
No, not right now.
Entering the season, you could make an argument that Tim Duncan still belonged in that number one spot, but this is the first time in a while we've seen him take a step backwards.
Yeah, and the Spurs are still doing well, so at this point it's not about what can Tim Duncan do, it's about what can they do as a collective, so that's fine. But what's interesting is so many people doubted Kevin Love before this season, and I never understood that, why they doubted him. He's a perpetual double-double machine. His defense is, whatever, but all stretch forwards' defense who aren't named Anthony Davis is usually whatever. Side note, could the Pelicans let Anthony Davis spread the floor more like they do, like the Timberwolves do Kevin Love?
It's hard with the three guards.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Davis needs to floor spacing. That's all I'm going to say. Floor spacing.
Well, it sounds like Dan is getting a little bit annoyed, which means that it's time to move into everyone's favorite closing segment.
Bacon! Where's the bacon? I smell bacon! Bacon! Gotta be bacon, only one thing smells like bacon!
What makes Dan a little bit crispy?
I'm more than a little bit crispy right now. I'm pissed. I understand the need to draw conclusions this early in the season because I do it for a living, but I don't understand what the differentiation is when we're talking panic buttons. Why is it that everyone's blowing the New York Knicks start and the Chicago Bulls start out of proportion, but we're not more concerned with the Clippers, who have an atrocious defense, and we're talking about their defense, but me and you just talked about them as a top 3 team in the Western Conference. Why are we not talking about the Brooklyn Nets, who are playing under 500 basketball, have a worse record than the Celtics, like the Knicks? Why is it just assumed that the Miami Heat are all of a sudden going to come out of this rut? Granted, the last one probably will, but let's show a little parity. It's too early to panic for any team. It's too early. And I'm completely fed up, and it's not just me as a Knicks fan. It's looking at the Bulls. It's looking at the Clippers and the Nets, who aren't receiving as much flack. Let's find an equilibrium. Let's find a balance. I want balance. Give me balance, Adam.
I can't really give you balance right now, but I can close it out by saying that that's what burns your bacon today. We want to know what makes all of you sizzle. We want to know what you think of the Suns, the Sixers, the Bobcats, and the Wolves, so let us know in the comments section. For Dan Favale, I'm Adam Fromal, and this is the Full Court Press.